Hello, this is Leadership Live. I'm David Rubenstein, coming to you from my home in Bethesda, Maryland. Over the last couple of years, I've interviewed many people on Bloomberg TV about their leadership positions, CEOs and other kinds of leaders of major organizations. Now I'm talking to these same kind of leaders as they manage their companies very often from their homes. And today, our special guest is Adena Friedman. She is the CEO of Nasdaq. Edina, thank you very much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thanks, David.
Now, you are in your home at the moment?
I am. Yep, I'm not far from you in Chevy Chase.
Okay, now let me give a brief introduction to Adena for those who may not know her. Adena is a native of my hometown, Baltimore, and she has gone to Williams as an undergraduate. Then she did her graduate work at the Owen School of Management at Vanderbilt, where she's just been put on the board of trustees. She graduated from Vanderbilt, I guess around 92 or 93, and joined Nasdaq in 1993 and rose up to be the chief financial officer and chief strategy officer when in 2011, my firm, Carlyle, recruited her to be our CFO. And she did a wonderful job getting us to be ready to go public, which we did before she left. And she was with us for 3 years, 2011 to 2014. We went public on Nasdaq, and she was recruited back by Nasdaq to be a senior officer, and now she's the CEO of the company. She's been the CEO for about 3.5 years. And during her 3.5 years, the market capitalization is up 60%, and the stock price is up 60%. So I should have bought NASDAQ when you went back there. Is that right?
Well, I would say that it's been a really, really fun journey since I've gotten back to NASDAQ for sure.
So let me ask you the question that's on a lot of people's minds about COVID and technology and so forth. The stock market and NASDAQ in particular have been booming. I think for 6 days in a row, your market was up, NASDAQ, and your market's up a fair bit the last month or so, even though we're in a COVID-19 crisis. Yet the economy seems to be not in such good shape. So how do you explain the market being so robust and the economy being such a bad shape?
Well, I think that there are two factors to consider. First, the composition of NASDAQ, the NASDAQ Composite Index and the NASDAQ 100 Index. If you look at the companies that choose to list on NASDAQ, we do have the companies that really are defining the economy of tomorrow. We do, of course, have companies from every sector listed on NASDAQ. But when you look at the companies that are doing well through this crisis, they do tend to be NASDAQ-listed companies, whether they're biotech companies. We have 94% of all biotech companies listed on NASDAQ, as well as technology companies. And those companies are demonstrating great resilience, which then, of course, drives the index values on the NASDAQ. I think the second key factor is the Fed. So the Federal Reserve in general, if you look at the overall performance of the markets, not just the companies listed on NASDAQ, but overall, I think the impact of the virus has been muted by the aggressive action of the Fed to support the economy, to support companies, to make sure that we have easy access to capital and that we can manage our companies through this crisis moment.
Now, the biggest companies market cap on your exchange are which?
So we actually have the top 5 technology companies in the world listed on NASDAQ. It's Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and also Netflix and others that are really important companies that are driving a lot of the behaviors and a lot of the services that we're getting used to in this crisis are from those companies.
So people who are not familiar with NASDAQ, what does NASDAQ actually stand for? It's not an easy acronym to kind of remember what it stands for. What does it stand for?
Well, in fact, that's a Jeopardy question.
Oh, really?
So the next time you watch Jeopardy and you see the question, you'll know the answer, which is the National Association of Securities Dealers Automated Quotations. So, which means that we were formed in 1971 as a subsidiary of the National Association of Securities Dealers, which now is FINRA. And we acted as a subsidiary of the NASD until 1999, when we demutualized and separated from the NASD. And now NASDAQ's just NASDAQ. It's a word in and of itself.
But the innovative thing about NASDAQ at the time was that you didn't have a lot of brokers running around on a floor, unlike, let's say, the New York Stock Exchange or the American Stock Exchange. You basically were doing it all electronically. Is that correct?
Exactly. So our entire foundation is based on the principle that we don't have to be in the same place in order for us to be able to succeed and to offer a robust trading environment for companies that are, companies who want to raise capital. So we were the first electronic exchange in the world. back in 1971. It was a very revolutionary concept to have a networked set of computers really driving the ability to raise capital and trade that capital. And so we were a disruptor of our time. Now we're 49 years old, and I would say we continue to work very hard to disrupt ourselves by making sure we're bringing the best of technology into the markets. And we now actually provide the technology to 120 other markets around the world. So we have really been able to propagate our model into the world's economy.
So for people who don't understand how this really works, if somebody wants to go public, they can pick, let's say, the New York Stock Exchange, or they can pick NASDAQ. Do they pay you or do you pay them?
So the way that our model works is that a company chooses to list on NASDAQ and they pay an annual fee. And then we then trade their securities for them. We also offer a whole host of investor relations services and governance services to support their listing. And then we do generate revenue from the trading. The trading generates an enormous amount of data, which is critically important to giving the transparency of the markets to every investor. That data is sold out to millions and millions of people. Actually, billions of people now have access to real-time data. And that's a third revenue source to us. And then our fourth key revenue source, actually, we have our indexes. So we talked about that, as well as our technology business, where we provide the technology that powers other exchanges as well.
Okay, so under COVID-19, the theory should be you should be in pretty good shape because you can do everything electronically. Did you have to send people home, or was that a challenge to send people home because they were working in office, but they're used to working with technology?
We were pretty early, actually, in making decisions to send our employees home, first in Asia. And then as it spread around the world, we worked very quickly to a split team environment and a work from home environment. So we had been working very hard over the years to enable our entire operation to be available to us in a work from home environment. And so it actually turned out to be a very smooth transition for our employees and for the markets, because we were able to maintain the management and operations of our markets in a remote environment.
So how many employees do you have?
We have 4,500 employees in 30 countries around the world. So it's complicated in that, as obviously this virus is spreading at different rates and different paces in different economies and different countries. So how we've managed to create that work from home environment. And then the big challenge, of course, is how do we bring people back in the coming weeks and months as we try to make sure we're helping to kickstart the economies that we operate in.
So normally when you're running the company, I presume you have senior people that report to you. You meet with them once a week, twice a week, or so forth. How are you doing that now? All by some kind of electronic means?
Yeah, so we do a weekly senior executive call, and then we do a bi-weekly call with about 50 people. We continue to do that, but we've actually been using video conferencing for that for 10 years. So as soon as we bought a company called OMX back in 2008, and OMX is the exchange operator in the Nordic countries, and they're the company that actually had built out this market technology business. As soon as we bought them, we actually put video presence in place in New York and in Stockholm, as well as in other cities. So we've been a video conferencing enabled company for a long time. So honestly, that actually hasn't changed much in terms of the weekly meetings and biweekly meetings. But what has changed is two things. One, our senior executive team now meets every day. So we meet every single morning to talk through all of the mechanics around managing our employees' safety throughout this entire situation, as well as other business topics. And then I've been doing weekly or biweekly all hands calls with all employees, whereas in our normal cadence, it would have been quarterly. So I think that's something that I'm excited to continue forever, because I find it's a great way to connect with the team.
Well, do you think you really need to bring all your people back into the offices because it seems to be working pretty well right now? Or do you think that a lot of people may not want to come back into the offices because they're afraid of traveling to the offices, or they're just comfortable working at home?
And it's a great point, David, because we did a survey of every employee to ask them what is their comfort level to come back under certain conditions and based on the status of different cities where we operate. And we have some employees who are eager to come back, but the vast majority of the employees want to continue to wait and see how things progress in the cities where they operate before they come back. We have the luxury of patience. We have the ability to work from home very effectively. So we will ask people if they want to come back voluntarily and they feel they can do it in a safe way. Then we would like to start to reopen offices to give them that flexibility. But we then will put a whole lot of protocols in place inside the offices to make sure that they stay safe while they're there. But the fact is, it will be voluntary only for the foreseeable future because we can work so effectively from home.
So will you have enough masks, or will you take everybody's temperatures? How will you deal with the safety issues?
Yeah, so we've been working through a kind of what we call a day in the life of an employee in each location. So that's the one thing we have to recognize is there are certain laws, local laws that might keep us from being able to take temperatures, but where we have the legal authority to be able to take temperatures, we will likely do that. We also have certain seating arrangements where we're setting up inside the offices so everyone can be socially distant, or I call it physically distant. I'm hoping socially they'll feel part of a community, but physically distant while they're there. Masks, we're contemplating how to use masks in the office and when we might need to use masks in the office. And so those are the types of things we've been working through to make sure we can create the right environment inside our offices.
Now, what are you personally doing? Now, you are at home with your husband and two sons, and is that working out okay?
It is. My two sons are grown, so they're in their 20s, so they're actually helpful, and they've been great contributors to all of the needs that we have here. And my husband is a wonderful, he's a wonderful father, wonderful husband. So everyone's been contributing to all of the needs we have here, and it makes it so I can focus on work, but at the same time have a little bit, actually more balance than I normally have, given my normal travel schedule.
So you are a black belt in Taekwondo. Are you able to do that online now, or how do you stay in shape doing that?
Well, so I do practice Taekwondo, and the studio where I practice has gone online. I was very impressed at how quickly they developed an online capability. They now are holding online classes, so you can sign up for those and be a part. And that's the power of video conferencing, because they not only you can see them, but they can see the students, which is pretty cool. And it's been very hard for them, though. I mean, they're one of those small businesses that are just so incredibly impacted by this, and they still have to pay all of their bills and all of their rent, despite the fact that they don't have the presence. And not every student is going to stick with them during this crisis, but all of the, I would say, loyal students are continuing to take classes. But it's like a microcosm of my, it's enabled me to understand some of the really, really challenging aspects of this virus and what it's doing to the small business community.
So let's talk about IPOs. Lots of times people want to take their companies public. They go public, let's say on the New York Stock Exchange or Nasdaq. Can you take companies public in this environment?
Yeah, in fact, we've had 5 IPOs or even 6 IPOs since the beginning of March. And what we are able to do, because of we're electronic exchange, we have all of our IPO related tools, what we call our book viewer and our book builder. They all can be managed in a remote setting. Both the underwriters can have access to them while they're working from home, and our IPO execution officer can manage the IPOs from his work from home environment. And so then we do a virtual IPO market open. We have the first trade, and we're able to support our companies throughout that whole experience and give them the visibility they're looking for that first day experience. Because we have our tower in Times Square, we can run a lot of programming on the tower and then share it out through our social channels, through traditional media channels, and enable them to have a great day, even though they can't physically be together.
So let's talk about China for a moment. The U.S.-China relationship is a little complicated at times, but maybe because of COVID-19. So are you taking companies public on NASDAQ that are Chinese-based? Is that a challenge now or not a challenge?
We are accepting listings from China. We always have. I think that both NASDAQ and New York have been an active market for companies from China. I do think that there are some challenges that the SEC has acknowledged, that they are going to address through a roundtable. So we do have some very specific issues with the way that disclosures are provided and from certain emerging markets, including China. I think the SEC is working on that. They've acknowledged that they have an issue to work on, and we're excited to work with them, frankly, to find ways to improve that part of the Chinese listing experience. But generally, we continue to be an active listing exchange for Chinese companies, including a company called Kingsoft Cloud that went public last week.
So a lot of people in the business community have been lobbying Congress or the administration to get some support to help them. Have you been lobbying Congress, the administration, on behalf of either your exchange or your members?
Well, we're in a very fortunate position where we don't have to lobby on our behalf. I think that, in fact, also the rules that govern the exchanges worked quite well through this crisis. So we haven't had to work very extensively with our regulators because the equities markets and the options markets have operated quite well through this whole crisis. But we do work with our listed companies to make sure that they're getting the support they need. And I'm a member of the BRT, the Business Roundtable. We are working very hard to make sure that we advocate for small businesses, to make sure they're getting the access to the capital they need. And then, of course, we can support the government as they're thinking through their programs. I have to say, I've been very impressed with the federal government, in terms of the fiscal support that they've been giving and how fast they moved, as well as the Fed. I think the Fed did some pretty extraordinary things early on so that they really staved off, they really did try to make sure that they staved off a deteriorating situation quite successfully.
Now, you are one of the few women running a major publicly traded company these days. We don't have as many women running them as I think we did years ago, actually. So do you feel any discrimination as being a woman running a major publicly traded company these days, or is that in the past, or is it still there a bit for you?
I really don't experience it at all. So I would say, first of all, I agree with you. It would be great to see more women become CEOs of major companies. But my whole experience actually in the financial services world has been quite a positive one as a woman in finance. I think NASDAQ and Carlyle are great environments for women. So I have never really felt a great deal of that kind of discrimination. And in fact, as a CEO, I feel fully part of that community, and it's been a great experience.
So the biggest challenge you face right now, is it the fortunes of your companies? They may not be as strong as they were before, or is it the overall general economy? What is the biggest challenge that NASDAQ faces?
Well, our business is quite resilient, but of course, it would be wonderful if we could have a better environment in terms of being able to provide a very welcoming environment for companies to go public, continue to find companies that want to do new things with our technology and develop new markets. We've had a very active pipeline of opportunities in our technology business to provide our technology to more exchanges around the world. Actually, this crisis has catalyzed some of activity in that because of the fact that our technology has been very resilient, and they are looking, a lot of exchanges around the world are continuing to look to modernize their infrastructure. But I would say that we prefer a stronger economic environment in general because I think it creates that ecosystem that allows all boats to float, of course, and makes it so that we have general growth drivers in the industry. But we have been fortunate in terms of the resiliency of the business that we operate. Where I've been actually focusing most of my time has been actually advocating on behalf of other companies, making sure the government is understanding the challenges that the companies are facing, making sure we're giving them the support they need, and also advocating for policies and practices around how to make it possible for companies to reopen safely.
So when you're advocating on behalf of these companies, do you do it by electronic means? You can't really do it any other way, I guess, these days. Is that right?
Yeah, calls and voice and video conferencing is the way of the present, and probably partially, at least, the way of the future.
So today, what is your own view, based on the knowledge you have of how your company is performing, of how the economy in the United States is doing? You still see it heading down for a while before it heads back up?
Yeah, I think that we were only 2 months into this, really, and I don't think that we see an easy mechanism for us to climb out of it until there are some medical breakthroughs. So I think we all are much more aware of the virus and what its impact is. I think that people now are much more careful about how they're interacting with others. I think that we're, as a community, going to hopefully create that sense of responsibility in terms of being physically distant from each other and managing our lives in a more conservative way for a period of time. But I think that still will keep the economy in a slower pace until we can find some medical breakthrough. It could be a better treatment so that this becomes more like a normal flu, and they find ways to stop the propagation of the virus in the body, or a vaccine or some other way to make it so that people just feel confident they're not going to get sick. And I personally believe that once that medical breakthrough comes through and we're able to produce it and deploy it, that confidence, certainly people will get back together. We are social beings. We want to gather. We want to have experiences. We want to go out to restaurants. We want to go to concerts, and we want to be able to travel the world. So I think that once that confidence is back, all of that will kick back in. But the question is going to be, what's the economy going to look like at that moment? Are people going to have the disposable income in order to be able to enjoy life again in a normal way? So I think that's where the government's playing such a critical role in trying to help people get through this challenging time.
And do you see in the other countries in which you operate or provide technology the same kind of concerns about going back to work? Is it much different here than it is overseas?
It's a good question, David, because it is different in different societies. So our largest office is in Stockholm, Sweden. And as many people know, Sweden has taken a different approach to this. But when I talk to the employees in our Stockholm office, I would say that they're a little more willing to be in the office. They're a little bit more relaxed, I would say, about the situation. But there are many of our employees who want to continue to work from home, and we're obviously going to continue to give them that choice, because I think that with their own family situations, want to make sure that they're managing the virus successfully. But so you do have a slightly different attitude coming from different parts of the world.
So what lessons would you give to a CEO who said, I've watched what you're doing. What should I be doing to manage my company in this environment? What lessons have you taken away from managing your company in this environment?
Yeah, I think the first thing is communication. So as I said before, we went from a quarterly cadence of all employee town halls to a weekly and biweekly. So we've kind of alternated between weekly and biweekly. And having that more informal way to communicate with employees, letting them see that you're as concerned as they are, that you're going through your own challenges, that you're managing through the situation, you have confidence in being able to manage through it, but you're also a person too. It's actually that compassion and that humanity has actually been what people really crave right now. I think that our employees have appreciated the access, and I've really appreciated getting a chance to have more communication with them. So that'll be something that we're going to continue, but that communication is critical. I think the second thing is, we have to, there's a really delicate balance that every company is striking between the safety of their employees and the ability to do their work and the ability to manage their business. And that balance is a very, very challenging balance. But at the end of the day, as a leader of the company, our view is that our employee safety is first and foremost, and we will find a way to manage our business through it while also managing the safety of our employees. And that's a very hard thing. We are very fortunate because our business is more geared towards a remote environment. But I think a lot of companies are facing that challenge. And I've been so heartened by the fact that CEOs that I've talked to, and I've spoken to a lot of CEOs, are extremely focused on employee safety. Even when their businesses are just completely impacted, they care the most about keeping their employees safe. And then the last thing is the role in the community. We are seeing right now what I call cooperative capitalism at work. Companies are giving back. They're contributing to their communities. They're giving away free services. They're buying up food from farmers and giving them to food banks. They're changing over their manufacturing plants to manufacture ventilators. They are doing things that are not in their immediate short-term economic interest, but they know that this is the way that they can help the entire economy make their way through this. And I've been really impressed with that, because that, coupled with the government, I think you're seeing like a huge amount of support for the American people as we've been working through this.
What is NASDAQ doing in the philanthropic area to deal with some of these challenges?
So we have given a sizable donation to 3 different charities. One is the World Food Kitchen. I always forget how to pronounce it. One is the World
Central Kitchen.
World Central Kitchen. The World Health Organization, as well as actually an organization that helps small businesses find ways to renegotiate loan terms or get their loans forgiven, to kind of help them through this. They do a huge amount of counseling, and that, I think, is also such an important part of what we can do. So we've been doing that, as well as giving our companies free time on our tower to be able to promote all the work that they're doing as well.
So what would you say is how this problem has changed your view of the future? Do you have a different view in the future, more optimistic, less optimistic in the future?
I think it's all about the time horizon as to when in the future. But I think that if I were to say on a post-COVID-19 world, because the one thing I really believe in is that we will get back to our normal cadence. I really am a big believer we will make our way through this, and we will find that while the world has changed, I think a lot will still stay the same. I think people will still want to explore the world. They'll want to, experience things in the world. But I also think that this concept of, do you all have to be in one room in order to feel like, you're together as a team, has really changed. So I've called this, the pandemic, the great equalizer internally. The only walls that are up between me and every single person at NASDAQ is time. So someone's in Stockholm and it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon in New York, I'm not going to call them. But other than time, everyone's equal. Everyone's got an equal contribution to make. There are no barriers. There's no walls. There's no offices. There's no, frankly, even national, kind of the whole idea of I can only work with these people because they're in my office. All of that's gone. And I'm really excited to have that become part of our culture forever. I think that's a big benefit that will come out of this.
So what has COVID-19 taught you about yourself?
Well, I am a hard-charging type A person. and I also really like routine. So I've really worked hard to keep my routine and get up early, exercise, do all of the things I would normally do in the office. So routine is critical for me to stay happy. And I think also, though, that I really didn't work from home ever. And I kind of felt like I have to put the uniform on, I have to go into the office, and that's where I'll be productive. And then I come home and I'm a different person. I'm home Edina and work Edina. Well, that's all blended now. And you know what? It's highly effective. It doesn't have to be as much separation. Right. And I can find a way to maybe create a little more balance over time.
So you expect to spend more time at home in the future? And is your husband happy with that or not happy?
That's a good question. You'll have to ask him because he has his own routine too. No, we've actually been having a great time together. But I think that I do think that having a little bit more of not feeling guilty about working from home. I used to feel guilty about it. Now I feel like I can be just as productive. I can communicate just as easily with people from all over the world using these technologies. So I think embracing that will help a lot of people find more balance.
So when you joined NASDAQ after leaving Carlyle, I should have bought the stock. As I mentioned, it's up by 60% since you became the CEO. Should I buy the stock now, just in case you're giving any stock tips out? Is your future still as good as it was in the last couple of years?
We are very excited about our future. I think that the technology that we're now able to provide our clients with, the way that we're working with the broker-dealer community and the investment community, providing the data analytics that we can provide to the investors, as well as, of course, our markets, I think that we feel very good about the way that we're partnering with our clients and the role that we play in the capital markets today and tomorrow. So I'm excited about it.
The biggest surprise that's happened in the last 2 months to you, the biggest thing that surprised you about your company, yourself, your employees, what's the biggest surprise?
To be honest, the biggest surprise to me, although we had a lot of planning, was how quickly we were able to work from home and how productive it was. Like, I think and I've heard that from a lot of CEOs, like right. Everyone expected more, I don't want to call it, more friction. And you know right. what? It's been amazing at how seamless the transition has been in many respects.
So there has never been a woman who served as Secretary of the Treasury. So if a president were to come along and offer you that job, what would you say?
Well, I would say that I would. I don't know what I would say, honestly, but I love the role I'm in. I love being the CEO of Nasdaq. I do feel like I have an enormous amount of impact on the world economies in the role that I'm in here at Nasdaq. But it's something. It's a flattering ask, but I think that Nasdaq is the place for me.
All right. Well, Adina, I want to thank you very much for giving us these insights. And I'm sure someday you probably will be offered that job. I hope you'll take it. And in the meantime, I'm sure you're going to do a great job for NASDAQ and all of its shareholders and all the member companies. So thank you for giving us this time and good day.
Thank you very much.